Thank you very much. And I think one of the most important things that was said is, what does this moment demand of you? And I think today would be a good day to actually reflect on that, because this room has both people who've met the challenge and others who continue to meet it as well. Now, as we move to a very important session that sort of sets the journey for the day, which is on philanthropy, I would request one quick thing. As we try to make this more interactive and have everyone reflect on what we're trying to inform here, could you take your phones out, please? We're going to do a quick poll. The poll question will be up there on. There's a website, menti.com. I think in one of the videos previously we talked about the use of technology, so here we go.
It's basically a knowledge sharing and learning platform. They have an annual gathering which is anchored by the philanthropists themselves, and they also have thematic events, about 3 to 4 every year, focused on a specific topic. The objective is, since it's anchored by philanthropists, they're really inspired to learn from each other and share from each other, and not duplicate efforts, but replicate efforts, and not make the same mistakes, but also, how we can piggyback on some of the great stuff that everyone is doing. It's the genesis of all of that also came from the Giving Pledge, in a way, which is basically a community of philanthropists who have come together to share their knowledge and their giving. In 2006, Warren Buffett, who's a great friend of Bill and Melinda, also invested about $30 billion of his shares to the foundation. They continue to grow, so that 30 billion has grown. But Bill, Melinda, and Warren basically, from that particular investment, realized that all of them started sharing, the 3 of them, between each other on different initiatives that they were doing. And they saw that, between the 3 of us, they could share so much, why not share with other philanthropists around? And that what led to the genesis of the Giving Pledge, is to bring all other philanthropists into the fold and to share and learn. And that is something which the India Philanthropy Initiative also inspires to do. Dasra Philanthropy Forum in Ahmedabad and the many cities that you spoke about in India and UK and the US has been an inspirational platform. And the ideas that are exchanged also go into practice. So it's not just being talkers. I think a lot of people are trying to be doers, as Sonal said.
Thank you. Dr. Adani, thank you again for joining us today, and more importantly, for your many, many years of service. I think it would be great for us to understand, in 1996, what led you as a family and as a company to really start focusing on CSR when it was not mandated, when it wasn't something that people had to do, but it was something that was nice to do. And so if you could maybe talk a little bit about that journey and maybe some of the stories that you saw on the ground, that would be fantastic.
So thank you again for having me here. I'm delighted to be amongst this August gathering. Yes, way back in 1996, we set up the foundation. And like any other traditional business houses, philanthropy was very close to the heart of the promoters. The second reason, which is very important, is that at Adani Group, we believe that CSR is not only good to feel, but it is a very integral part of the business, especially the sustainability of the businesses. And hence, the journey from 1996 to today has been so great, actually. We've expanded in various areas, and with a lot of dedication, we have been able to create a great impact. Now, interestingly, as we started with traditional philanthropic activities, it was after the earthquake in 2001, where we got a actually first-hand experience. There was this devastating earthquake where the entire the town of Bhuj had collapsed to rubbles. And this, as our port, Mundra port, was very near to that place, we took the opportunity to camp over there and stayed at Bhuj for 1 month, providing relief work. Every day, over 1,000 people came. We gave food, shelter, counseling, and made them comfortable to proceed to their relatives which were outside. And it just in a few minutes, we see that how the catastrophic can create a result where a man is suddenly homeless, jobless, and helpless. After that, we came into rehabilitation. So that was a real turning point of the foundation, where we scouted from village to village, and to understand this real scenario of one is the effect of the earthquake, and secondly, we got a first-hand experience that really what are the challenges of the villages in India. We started our first school in a short span of 5 months, because the earthquake had resulted in urgency to start an education institution. Within 5 months, we started the first English medium school, CBSE affiliated, did all the construction, the approvals, recruitment, and admissions, everything together. In this, we developed the expertise of project management and speed. Incidentally, in this whole process, we saw that we could get, especially when we went from village to village, we saw how we can develop an integrated village development plan. And that's the actual foundation of where the basis where today Adani Foundation stands, where we are into integrated development in all areas of the development of the village, touching each and every segment and the life cycle of villagers. A short incident that I would like to narrate, which is just recently how one school can change a generation. So it was after the earthquake when we started this school, and for admissions we scouted from village to village and trying to convince the villagers to send their children to our school. Incidentally, the girls from the nearby villages who were from the farmer families, first generation learners, they also enrolled. And the first day of school, I still remember when they came with their traditional attire and silver jewelry. Today, I'm very proud to see last week one of these such girls came to meet me, and she was going abroad for higher education. She was going to Ireland on a scholarship. She was the first girl in her village to get higher education and to go abroad. So that's, I think, the impact of such programs.
That's fantastic, and I think what I really appreciate here is that, and we've seen this in our last 20 years as well, that many times when catastrophe hits, like the Gujarat earthquake, like the floods, like the typhoons, like the cyclones that we're seeing more and more and more due to climate change, it brings us as a community together to support. But it's actually in those instances we realize that in these communities, given their economic status, typically it has forced them to live on lands that are more prone to disasters. And while the disaster is critical for us to provide rehabilitation support to, the issues that exist are far, far greater than that. And so it's unfortunate that it's a disaster that sort of lets us as communities focus on them, but then very quickly we realize, like you guys did, that sort of this integrated village development program is important with or without a disaster. And many communities in India still need that. So thank you so much. Steve, like I said, we were fortunate to support Reach to Teach at the very early stages of its development. And similar to, I would say, the learning that the Adani Foundation and CSR has gone through, it'd be great to sort of talk a little bit about the learnings that Reach to Teach has sort of applied in the past decade, how you started and where you sort of are today.
Sure. Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel this morning. And it's really inspiring, frankly, to see and meet so many of you who are involved in this vital work. Reach to Teach has, as you said, it existed for more than a decade now, and it's always been focused on work in Gujarat. And the reason for that wasn't any great scheming and thought about where would we be most effective. It really was that the founder of Reach to Teach, Sanjeev Gandhi, his family was from Gujarat, and as an entrepreneur in the UK, he really wanted to give something back. And so Reach to Teach started on a very small scale. I was certainly not involved. I've only been involved for the last 2 to 3 years. But it started with a very small school bus. The idea was that it wanted to focus on providing education, foundational education in literacy and numeracy to the most rural and marginalised children in the state. And the bus would then go around to village and to some of the most remote houses to try and give some education to the children. And then, frankly, something rather unusual happened with Reach to Teach, which is that Sanjeev Gandhi brought in a former colleague of his, a guy called Matthew Simons, who was a journalist, to get involved with Reach to Teach and become one of the trustees. And Matthew just happened to know a man called Larry Ellison. And Larry Ellison, for those of you who don't know, I think is the 6th richest person in the world, the founder of Oracle, and still to this day its CEO. Matthew had been writing a book for Larry about his life, and he just asked Larry whether Larry would be prepared maybe to give a small donation to Reach to Teach. And instead of giving maybe a few $1,000s, Larry actually committed to give the organization $100 million over a 10-year period, which was a challenge for this organization, because it was a very small organization and suddenly it was faced with a huge amount of money. And of course, with that, an expectation that the charity needed to do more than run a bus. It needed to have a more systemic impact, a much broader impact, sustainability, impact, scale of the words that are going to come up again and again and again. And with that kind of a philanthropic background, that was essential for us. So we've been through quite a various different stages of a journey. Around 5 years ago, we developed what I think was a very effective, although quite expensive, model of supporting schools directly, government schools in Gujarat, through actually bringing in people in the schools to support the head teachers, to support teachers with better learning. We've always believed that the thing that makes the biggest difference to a child's educational outcomes is the quality of teaching they receive. And indeed, everyone in the system, from the government minister right the way down through the officials, down to everyone in schools, should always be thinking, what can I do that will help to meet the child's learning challenges better? And so we worked on this model. We worked at the same time with the communities. We built a program around community ownership. It was a bottom-up program, working with local NGOs to really enhance regular attendance in school. If a child doesn't go to school, they can't learn, regardless of the quality of the teaching. So that was the model which we ran for about the last 5 years, and we were working across around 230 schools in some of the most remote, marginalised communities, including quite a number in Kutch. And then in the last year or so, we felt that we wanted to take those learnings and begin to try to work at a more scalable model. So actually working to develop trainers of teachers, working a bit with government, and we had a scheme for doing that, focusing on head teachers and teachers while still working on the idea of community. And we were ready to roll out that program, and then the next change happened, which was only less than a year ago, where the government itself, knowing our work, Dr. Rao, who is the State Secretary for Primary Education, said, look, we think you should stop working on that last mile, the schools. That's really where the government belongs, and we'd like you to work with us and embed people with us to help us and help out, give us capacity, and also build our own capabilities and align us to actually support what needs to happen across the schools. And so we signed an MOU, and we've been embedding people in the government to work alongside them, which is challenging, working with partner of government. But if you want to have scale in education, at least, there really is no option but to work with government. And actually, it is an enlightened leadership we have now that knows what needs to be done and really wants to focus on learning outcomes. More recently, though, the other change that's also going through at the same time, we've been in perpetual change, is that the Larry Ellison Foundation, the LEF, themselves have become established as a body, and they have been very keen to build a coalition of organisations in Gujarat in education. So at the same time as we're working directly with government, we're also one of around 5 or 6 organisations, including Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CSF, Centre Square Foundation, Akshara, Literacy and Learning Foundation. We're working together, again, hand in hand with government ownership, to try and promote a transformed foundational literacy and numeracy outcomes across the state. So we've been through lots and lots of changes. It's challenging. Working in coalition, in partnership with other organisations is very challenging. The word humility was used earlier, and that's something which I think anyone who goes into real coalitions has to some extent, be prepared to sometimes subordinate their own organisation's kind of bravado and kind of presence and say, look, let's really work together. Let's actually talk together, understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and actually build something really strong together. Because it's very hard to do. It's easy to say. Not that I was saying it very clearly, but actually I think it's essential if you want to have scalability these days. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Arnav, I'm going to actually on this same theme, the Gates Foundation, as many of you guys must know, is the largest foundation that's ever existed. Yet with that, I think what's very unique is it has come with very little bravado. And in fact, you guys knew from day one the need to collaborate with others, and more importantly, the need to support government. I've been fortunate to be in conferences where we've heard Bill Gates himself speak around how what they can do globally is a drop in the bucket compared to what the government has resources to do, and more importantly, what the communities themselves are doing every single day. If you can maybe give an example of how the Gates Foundation has worked, again, alongside government and NGOs here in India, I think that would be fantastic.
Sure. So I think the role of philanthropy, as Bill and Melinda feel, is not to replace the government, with the services they provide, or the private sector. The role of philanthropy is to act as a catalyst, primarily two areas. One is around creating innovation, and second is around addressing market failure. On the innovation side, I'll pick up one example, which is the common application software which we've developed with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, which is basically a tool for all the Anganwadi workers, for them, who use about 8 or 12 registers right now, for them to use a tab and put all the information on a digital tool, which then can provide real-time data and monitoring for the government to take decisions. We are also being in talks with the Gujarat government. They have their own TECO platform, which is a platform for ANMs and ASHAs. And many governments are now, state governments are thinking about how they can bring together, the AAA convergence, which is around Anganwadis, ASHA, and ANMs on one platform. So we are seeing how TECO plus Anganwadis can come on one platform, one CAS. And we're also collaborating with Wadhwani family on the same in this. The other example I'll quickly just mention is on the National Fecal Sludge Alliance, which Dasra is well aware of and leading. We have about 50 to 60 NGOs are working in the sanitation space. This platform has brought all of them together to share the learnings that each of them bring to the table, and also to advocate with the government using evidence. And I think in the video was also mentioned the fecal sludge policy, which came out was as part of this entire collaborative effort. The government has done a great job thinking about removing open defecation, reducing open defecation. It's important to push the dialogue on fecal sludge management, which is treating the waste. Even if you use a toilet in the hotel, if it's not getting treated, it's equivalent to being open defecation. So it's important to push the dialogue on fecal sludge management, and the government and with all the partners has acknowledged and moved forward on that. So it's basically an effort and led by all the partners, and we've played pretty much in the back on all of this. So it's all to the partners and the other foundation that are part of this collaborative.
Thank you. And Dr. Adani, again, if you can maybe talk about a few instances that you guys have also supported government. And just to, again, reiterate this to the audience, for India to achieve its commitment to some of the goals that they've set out to do in Niti Aayog, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to inequality, when it comes to providing dignity to all, we would as a country need to spend $960 billion annually between now and 2030 to achieve those goals. And so there is no way, even if you get the richest Indians in the country together to give all of their money in philanthropy, even in 1 year, their money would not be enough to achieve those goals. And so philanthropy has a role, as Arnav said, to be catalytic, but then in partnering with government, you're actually then able to support the already large amounts of funds that the government is using, but you're able to bring innovation, bring technology, bring evidence, which they may not have evidence to provide. And so I think, Dr. Adani, it'd be great to get your sense of sort of, again, areas that you guys have worked with government and how you've seen that as the right path.
See, our learnings, as I just said before, when we started with 14 villages and expanded currently to 2,250 villages across 18 states of India. We have learned that for expansion and scale, it is very important to partner with the government administration, as well as the organizations. Their reach is deep into the country. And when we want to work in rural setups, it is equally advantageous as well as important to work along with the government. There are a couple of advantages here. With my personal experience, I can share with you that when there is the support of the government and we also align our projects with the SDGs as well as the projects of national importance like malnutrition or Swachhata, then the effect is cumulative as well as there is a multiplicity of the impact in that case, because there is a convergence of ideas, a convergence of the momentum at that particular time. Partnering along with the government again is always very advantageous, because there is support. Like I would just like to narrate one project that we are working on where it's an integral part of the government. That's about curbing malnutrition, is the project Suposhan, where we are, our intervention is at the last connectivity, partnership with Anganwadi workers, with ASHA workers, as well as the Department of Development and Women and Child Development. So when everyone comes together for this particular cause, and there is a cumulative effect, and we are seeing transformations already in large areas. We have adopted the entire district of Narmada, which is an aspirational district identified by the Niti Aayog, highest number of malnutrition in the state of Gujarat. We have created village level resources. The women in the village, and we named them Sanginis, they pass through 3 levels of training, and they are empowered to identify malnourished children in their localities. They do focus group counseling with pregnant women, with lactating mothers, counseling with the families, the mother-in-laws, as well as other family members, especially the husband, for the importance of nutrition. And here we are seeing that this collaboration has really given us great results.
And lastly, Steve, before we open it up to the audience, I think this term, again, collaboration is critical. And so if you can help us understand what are some of the key focus areas that you guys have seen which really enables greater collaboration to occur.
Thank you for that. Gosh, I think what I'd say is it's quite challenging collaboration. I think the one thing I would say is that I think whether you're collaborating, whether you're having an organisation provide, another organisation provide certain services to you, or whether you're truly in a coalition, there's no substitute for upfront planning and no substitute for upfront. You need to clarify what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, what are the governance that's going to apply. Because while you want to ditch institutional egos, again, that's easier said than done. And I think you really need to work closely together in those early stages, build the collaboration, build the partnerships. I personally believe, and we're going to follow this in the coalition we're putting together now, I personally believe that there's no substitute for co-location of people working on the same issues. I've worked in many international organizations, the OECD, the Commonwealth, and the United Nations, and when you really want to break down barriers, silos, different organizations, and have people working together, sit them together. And we're going to do that in this initiative. We're going to have people co-located here in Gujarat. We already have people working actually alongside people in the government. We're also going to have people working in the same offices as CSF, so we can really build that understanding between organisations, because I think that's key for successful collaboration.
Great, thank you guys so much. With that, we're going to open it up for questions. We have individuals with microphones walking around. So if you could just please raise your hand, and if you can say your name and the organization you're with, that would be great before you ask your question.
So, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Priti Ben. I'm Amit Mehta. I head my foundation. We work in education and skilling in Vapi. Anyways, it's more of a question for probably everybody. Sustainability is kind of a buzzword for most of the corporates. And I don't see a lot of NGOs working in the field of teaching sustainability at the school level. Probably can we kind of have the next generation programs being delivered at the school level, because I think they are going to, if they want to see a better world, they probably need to get the real meaning of sustainability, practice it, and can this kind of be integrated in the existing school programs? Because on the forum itself, you people would be handling maybe thousands and thousands of schools. Now that's something which I've been thinking of a lot, and I would just like your views on that.
This is a very relevant question. Coming from the corporate, I understand the importance of sustainability, which has become really an important word. At the school level, we work with more than 10,000 schools across the country, and not only improving the learning levels, but also the value education as well as awareness regarding the sustainability becomes an integral part of our interventions. There are environment clubs in the schools. There are projects related to sustainability, how to have safe drinking water, conserve water, growing plants and trees within the school premises. So lots of hands-on activities can create these kind of situations. Apart from that, there are street plays as well as local, as we call the processions that we take out in the villages, celebrating Environment Day, celebrating Water Day. And I think that the process is already started at various school levels.
I agree with everything you said. That I'm just going to make the obvious point that if one wants to have sustainability in anything, this is why it's so important that there is that ownership at the local level, that whatever work we're all doing, if it's not owned, in my case, if it's not owned by the schools and by the communities, so that they can see the value and they actually own it, then going forward it won't happen. In the school sector, for example, no one actually reforms schools except schools themselves. They need to be supported, encouraged, motivated, incentivized to do this. But when it comes to sustainability in anything, if it's not owned, understood, and really led at that level, then whatever intervention you have will be short-lived, and the broader sustainability questions of environments, sanitation, etc., will also get ignored.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rajendra Joshi, founder of an organization called Saath. We have been working in, with the urban poor over the last 30 years. And we have developed hybrid model, We have one part which does the innovation, does the, work with communities which cannot really afford to pay. And at the same time, we have another arm which, creates revenue. So my question is, how does philanthropy look at hybrid models? Because you may invest, you may give a grant, and then that grows into a sustainable business. So the question is for the panel is that how do you view hybrid models? Thank you.
For the Gates Foundation, I would say, generally also relevant broadly is it's problem first and instrument second. So, an instrument could be a grant, could be a contract, it could be an equity investment, could be a debt investment, could be a volume guarantee. And, there's a wide variety of instruments which can be used depending on the organization level. Grant is a is risk capital, while equity debt has different perspectives, but the idea is same to solve the problem. Sustainability is again integral to any organization that we will work with, like you said before. But I would say, you can use any of these instruments, and as you graduate, the organizations, one can, make a debt or equity investments also in these organizations.
Yeah, no, and I think that first example that I gave in my speech of coming here and working with Vineet Rai, who went on to start Avishkar, which is India's largest impact investing fund, I think is a great example of how they have seen certain solutions that are helping in creating impact on the ground that are business-led, and they invest in those. And I think in that sense, Dasra provides more on the philanthropic support side of things. And one of our funders, who's actually been instrumental, not just in India, but globally, that does this really well, is the Omidyar Network. And they provide grant funding, they provide equity, they provide debt, and they really look at organizations that are hybrid models, as you said, that may have a social focus as well as a business focus, and they're able to provide them flexible forms of capital, enabling them to create that impact on the ground.
And I can just give two examples quickly that we recently made. One is in AgTech on Cropin, which is an ag fintech platform, to connect markets to farmers. And another is in Stellapps, which is basically a dairy IoT player, which looks at, the dairy value chain on the entire IoT. So, depending on the organization, I think every form of capital or instrument, I think, is, open, and one takes a call accordingly.
So hi, my name is Abhinav. I am a founder of a foundation called Million Sparks Foundation. We are in the area of teacher capacity building using technology. So we have an app using which we are working with close to 200,000 teachers across 60,000 schools in 6 states of India. I don't see a lot of acceptability of tech-oriented solutions yet. And I want to understand, what is the take of philanthropy on taking up tech solutions at scale? Given the size of India, you can't really go to every school, teach every teacher personally. For the scale of India, which has 10 million teachers, and you really cannot go to every single teacher. So it will have to be tech-led. And we have a proven program, but we find it not easy to actually get philanthropy interested in tech solutions because they want to have something tangible. And I just wanted to add, we do a lot of work with Sustainable Development Goals. We have UNEP, UNICEF as partners. They put a lot of content on us. They're putting up a challenge also. So that's something that we do, and it can scale. How do we get the philanthropists interested in tech solutions?
I'm going to take this on slightly a little bit because I think you've made a good point. I think, as I said before, my charity totally believes that the primary way in which to improve education of children is better teaching. We never think that technology can be a replacement for the teacher, not in an effective way, certainly not at foundational literacy and numeracy, but at the same time, technology and edtech solutions do offer real kind of tools to be used by the teacher. I think the frustration you're feeling is something that is shared. It's our organisation is less involved, but the Larry Ellison Foundation is very involved in this, and obviously with his background, he's very keen that technology be leveraged in order to improve education. I know that they are doing a project at the moment in consultation with CSF, and that they would want to then bring that to government. The frustration sometimes is that whether it's government procurement systems, I'm told, whether it's governments, they might invest in hardware. Quite often you'll find smart boards going up across many parts of India, but when it actually comes to the thing that probably makes the most difference, which is the effective ed tech and the actual programs, what have you, it is proving more difficult. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that a number of organisations are looking at that. The only thing I would say, of course, is that in some areas, the areas where we've been working, you do also have the challenges of not having regular electricity supply and things like that. But there are often ways around some of those challenges as well going forward. So I don't have an answer, but I can tell you that there are a lot of people working on it and with the same question. Thank you.
Great. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. We started a little late today, and one of the things you'll see by the end of the day is that Dasra, we are very strong believers of sticking to time. and so I think the panelists will still be here. They'll be here to answer your questions. I apologize, sir, but we'll have to move on to the next panel now. Thank you guys so much for sharing your insights and for doing the work you do. Thank you.